The street was calm most days, the kind of place where mornings started slow and evenings ended early. The houses looked similar, with trimmed lawns and matching mailboxes. It felt safe and quiet, which was exactly why the homeowner chose it. He had spent years saving to buy a place where he could relax, mind his own business, and not feel watched. For the first few weeks, everything felt right. Neighbors waved from a distance. Dogs barked once or twice and then went silent. Nothing seemed out of place. He worked long hours and valued peace when he came home. On weekends, he fixed small things around the house, washed his car, and sat outside with a cup of coffee. He followed the rules without thinking much about them. Trash cans went out on the right day. The lawn stayed neat. The driveway stayed clear. He never imagined that doing everything right could still attract trouble. The first sign came on a warm afternoon, and he was unloading groceries from his car. A woman stood across the street, arms crossed, watching him closely. Her stare felt heavy, like she was counting every move. He nodded politely, thinking she was just curious. Instead of nodding back, she walked over, heels clicking against the pavement. She stopped a few steps away and spoke in a sharp tone. She asked if he knew that parking rules were very strict in the neighborhood. He was confused. His car was in his own driveway. He replied calmly that he believed he was following the rules. She smirked and said she was part of the HOA and knew the rules better than anyone. She told him to be careful because violations added up fast. He thanked her for the information, hoping the conversation would end there. It did not. She leaned closer and pointed at the curb, claiming he was blocking a space that emergency vehicles might need. The curb was clear. Nothing was blocked. Still, she spoke with confidence, as if saying it enough times would make it true. After she finally walked away, he felt uneasy. The encounter replayed in his mind. He checked the HOA handbook that night, reading every line. Nothing she said matched what he read. He brushed it off, telling himself she was just overly serious about her role. A few days later, a warning notice appeared on his door. It mentioned improper trash can placement. He checked the timestamp. The notice was placed hours before trash pickup even ended. His cans were already back in place by then. He looked around and noticed other homes still had their cans out, yet none had notices. That was when he realized this was not random. Someone was watching him closely. Too closely. The next weekend, while he was trimming the edge of his lawn, she appeared again. This time, she carried a clipboard. She stood on the sidewalk, writing as she spoke. She told him his grass was slightly higher than allowed. He measured it right in front of her. It was within limits. She sighed loudly, clearly annoyed that he checked. She warned him that repeated violations could lead to fines or worse. Her words were chosen to scare, not inform. He stayed calm, though his chest felt tight. He told her he respected the rules and would continue following them. She rolled her eyes and said people like him always said that after that, the visits became frequent. She never greeted him kindly. She never smiled. Each time, she found something new. A hose that was visible. A car parked for too long. A package left on the porch. Small things that no one else seemed to notice or care about. Neighbors started avoiding eye contact when she was around. Some looked sympathetic, but said nothing. Others acted like they did not want to get involved. The homeowner began to feel isolated. It's like he was being singled out in plain sight. One evening, he overheard her talking to another neighbor. She spoke loudly, saying some people moved in and thought rules did not apply to them. She hinted that she would teach them a lesson. He knew she was talking about him. Instead of reacting, he decided to stay quiet and observant. He started taking photos of his lawn, driveway, and porch after every task. He saved copies of HOA rules. He kept dates and times written down. Not because he wanted a fight, but because he sensed one coming. The tension grew when a notice arrived, claiming a serious violation. The wording sounded official and threatening. It said the matter could be escalated if not corrected. Yet it did not explain what exactly was wrong. He read it several times, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. He contacted the HOA office directly. The response was slow and vague. They said they would look into it. Days passed with no answer. Meanwhile, she continued to patrol the street, stopping near his house more often than anywhere else. One morning, he found her standing on his driveway, taking photos of his car. He asked her politely to step off his property. She laughed and said HOA authority allowed her to inspect anything visible. He knew that was not true, but he did not argue. He simply watched and recorded from his phone. That moment changed something inside him. The fear started turning into resolve. He realized that silence alone would not stop her. Truth would. He reviewed every interaction in his mind. The warnings that made no sense. The lies spoken with confidence. The way she enjoyed making him uncomfortable. It was not about rules. It was about control. Late that night, as he sat at his kitchen table surrounded by papers, he noticed something odd. One notice had a logo slightly different from the official one. Another used language not found in any HOA document. Small details, but important ones. A pattern was forming. He did not know yet how far she would go. But he felt certain she was bending rules, maybe even making them up. The calm neighborhood he moved into was no longer peaceful. But he refused to be pushed out. As he turned off the lights and prepared for bed, he told himself one thing. He would not raise his voice. He would not lose control. He would let her reveal her own mistakes. Outside, the street remained quiet. But beneath that calm surface, a storm was building. And this was only the beginning. After the first few tense encounters, the homeowner began noticing a pattern. Every small thing he did around the house seemed to attract her attention. The way he parked his car, how he arranged his garden, the hours he cleaned the driveway, nothing escaped her eyes. At first, he thought it was mere coincidence, but it became clear that she was intentionally targeting him. The more he tried to live quietly, the more she seemed determined to make him feel uncomfortable. One afternoon, he was painting the trim of his front porch. He carefully measured the edges and worked slowly to make sure it looked neat. He stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead, satisfied with the work. That was when she appeared again, clipboard in hand, standing on the sidewalk with a look that seemed designed to unsettle him. Without greeting him, she began pointing out tiny imperfections, things he barely noticed himself. She spoke as if every brushstroke had been a crime, her tone sharp and condescending. He calmly explained that the paint was still drying and any minor smudges would be corrected. She waved him off, insisting that the rules had to be followed exactly, and left before he could respond further. It wasn't just the visual inspections that were stressful. Soon, he started receiving notes slipped under his door, taped to his mailbox, or left in his car. The messages ranged from polite reminders about HOA regulations to stern warnings about supposed violations. Some were confusing, others flat out inaccurate. He began keeping a folder for all the papers and photographs to document what was happening. He realized that one day, these records might be important if he needed to prove the truth. The homeowner noticed that the HOA woman's warnings were not applied evenly. Other neighbors had minor issues like a slightly uneven hedge or a car parked for too long, but they never received warnings. He discreetly asked around, and a few neighbors admitted they had seen her act the same way toward others before, but mostly avoided confrontation. He understood quickly that it was not about rules. It was about control. She wanted to assert her power, to show she was in charge. One evening, while watering his garden, he overheard her speaking to a couple of neighbors. She made a dramatic statement about newcomers not understanding the community, rules, and how she made it her mission to keep everyone in line. Her words were loud and pointed, and he could tell she meant him. He decided not to respond immediately. Instead, he focused on gathering evidence, thinking carefully about every move he made outside. The tension escalated when he received a notice claiming that his lawn had not been mowed properly. He checked his yard carefully. Everything looked well maintained. Even so, the notice threatened fines for non-compliance. He found it strange that the warning was issued at a time when the HOA inspection wasn't even scheduled. He decided to photograph his lawn every morning, making sure he had proof of compliance. As days passed, she started making unexpected appearances. Sometimes, She would walk by in the early morning, other times in the late evening. She always acted like she had the right to be there, lingering just long enough to make him feel uneasy. Neighbors who had once greeted him politely now crossed the street or hurried past. The homeowner could sense the subtle pressure building, an invisible weight that made even routine activities stressful. Despite the stress, he tried to maintain his normal routine. He mowed the lawn, washed the car, and tended to the garden as usual. Each time, he made sure to document everything with photographs or videos. It was tiring, but he knew he had to protect himself in case things escalated. He also began reviewing the HOA guidelines in detail, learning exactly what was allowed and what wasn't, to counter any false claims. One day he received a message on his door that was more aggressive than the others. It accused him of multiple violations, including noise complaints, which he knew were false. He had not played loud music or disturbed the neighbors. He realized that she was now fabricating issues to intimidate him further. Instead of panicking, he calmly read the message, took photographs, and made notes of the time and date. He considered speaking to the HOA office, but he was cautious. He wanted to approach the matter with careful evidence rather than emotions. He prepared a clear record of every interaction, dates, times, photographs, and copies of the notes she had left. He knew he needed to show the truth if things got serious. The homeowner also began noticing her methods. She seemed to exaggerate minor issues, present them as serious violations, and leave threats that felt official but were vague. He realized that anyone without documentation could easily feel cornered or guilty, even when they had done nothing wrong. He decided that staying calm, methodical, prepared was the only way to deal with her. The neighborhood's quiet routine had been disrupted. What used to be peaceful mornings now felt tense. Every movement outside seemed to be under scrutiny. But instead of letting fear take over, the homeowner found a sense of purpose in preparation. Each note, each warning, each unexpected visit became a piece of the puzzle. He was learning not just about the HOA woman's behavior, but about human nature and the value of careful observation. It became clear that this was more than just a series of small annoyances. The HOA woman was deliberately targeting him. She enjoyed the power she held, the ability to unsettle him with rules and warnings. He understood that confronting her aggressively could make things worse. Instead, he focused on building a strong foundation of truth. Knowing that patience and careful documentation would eventually reveal her actions, one evening, while reviewing his folder of evidence, he noticed patterns in her behavior. She tended to appear when she knew he would be outside. Her notes often contained vague threats, and she seemed to monitor him more than anyone else. He also discovered inconsistencies in some of the warnings that did not align with the official HOA regulations. Small details, like incorrect logos and misleading language, pointed to a deeper problem. He realized she was bending the rules to suit her own agenda. Despite the stress, he continued his routine, determined not to let her win. He mowed the lawn, trimmed the hedges, and washed the car with care, documenting everything along the way. Every photograph, every note, and every interaction became a shield against false claims. He also started talking quietly with a few neighbors who had noticed her behavior. Gathering small pieces of information without causing a scene, the more he observed, the more he understood her tactics. She relied on fear and intimidation, hoping that people would follow her instructions without question. She used vague threats to create uncertainty, making it difficult for anyone to defend themselves. But by keeping detailed records, the homeowner realized he could counter her claims effectively. Knowledge and preparation were his strongest tools. As the days passed, the tension on the street remained. The HOA woman continued her inspections and warnings, but he was no longer intimidated. Each encounter reinforced his strategy: remain calm, document everything, and follow the official rules. He knew that she was counting on fear to control him, but he refused to give her that power. In the evenings, he often sat on his porch, reviewing notes and photographs, reflecting on each interaction. He thought about the importance of truth and patience. The more he prepared, the more confident he felt. It was clear that her actions were deliberate, and that meant they could be exposed. Each day of careful observation and documentation was another step toward revealing the truth. The calm street outside contrasted sharply with the tension that had built around his home. What had started as small annoyances had become a test of patience, strategy, and resilience. He knew the challenges were far from over, but he also knew he had taken the right approach. By staying calm, following the rules, and collecting evidence, he was preparing for the moment when the truth would come to light. He looked forward to the day when the situation would be resolved, confident that fairness and reason would prevail. For now, he continued his quiet work, documenting every detail, observing every move, and staying focused on the truth. The HOA woman could try to intimidate him, but she could not control reality. He was determined, patient, and ready to let her actions speak for themselves. The homeowner had settled into a careful routine, but the HOA woman's actions began to take a more serious turn. What had started as petty complaints and vague warnings now seemed like a plan to make him appear guilty of something major. One morning, he found a notice on his door claiming he had violated an important neighborhood rule. The letter was formal, almost intimidating, and suggested that legal action could follow if he did not comply. It didn't specify exactly what the violation was. He reread the notice multiple times, feeling a knot of tension in his chest. He knew immediately that something was off. He had followed every rule, measured every inch of his lawn, and kept detailed records of all his work. Nothing he had done could be construed as a violation. Still, the language in the notice made it feel like a threat. He took photos of the notice and carefully placed it in his folder of evidence. Realizing that this could be a turning point, he contacted the HOA office directly, requesting clarification. The response was slow, and when it came, it was vague and unhelpful. They said they would look into the matter, but did not provide any specifics. The homeowner felt frustrated, but he stayed calm. He understood that reacting angrily or defensively might play into the HOA woman's hands. He decided to let her actions speak for themselves while he gathered more proof in the following days. Her behavior became more aggressive. She appeared on his driveway early in the morning, taking photos of his car and lawn, and lingering longer than necessary. She started leaving longer notes, sometimes including small threats about fines and other consequences. He noticed that some of the messages had inconsistent wording, and one even contained a logo that didn't match the official HOA seal. These small mistakes made it clear that she was bending the rules to target him. He also noticed that her reports often contained exaggerations. A slightly uneven hedge became a violation of landscaping rules. A minor stain on the driveway was described as neglect. He began to see a pattern. She was taking small issues and twisting them to look serious, hoping to intimidate him and make him question his actions. He realized that anyone without evidence would likely feel guilty, even if they had done nothing wrong. One afternoon, while he was outside cleaning his porch, a neighbor approached quietly and mentioned they had seen her speaking to others about him. She had claimed that he was ignoring rules and creating problems for the neighborhood. The homeowner thanked the neighbor and listened carefully. It confirmed what he suspected. This was not just about minor mistakes, but a deliberate campaign to make him look bad. He knew that confronting her directly could escalate the situation. So he decided to continue documenting everything. Every photograph, every note, every interaction was added to his growing folder of evidence. He even started recording short videos of the yard and driveway, showing that all work was done properly and on time. He also began keeping a detailed log of her appearances, noting times, dates, and her behavior. The situation intensified when he received a message, claiming that neighbors had reported him for loud noises late at night. He had not played music or made any noise that could disturb anyone. The accusation was completely false, but it carried a serious tone. He calmly documented the message and reviewed his own schedule to confirm he had not been outside or noisy at the times mentioned. He realized she was now fabricating complaints to make him appear guilty. Despite the stress, he continued his normal routine. Mowing the lawn, trimming hedges, and washing the car became acts of quiet defiance. He made sure to take photos before, during, and after every task. He knew that preparation and evidence were the only ways to counter false accusations. Each day of careful documentation strengthened his position and gave him a sense of control. The HOA woman continued to patrol the street, sometimes lingering near his property for extended periods. Other neighbors had started to notice but were hesitant to speak up. Some quietly nodded in sympathy, while others avoided interaction altogether. He understood that many people feared getting involved, but he felt determined to see the situation through with integrity. One evening, while reviewing his notes, he noticed a strange pattern in the timing of the notices and visits. Almost all of them occurred when she knew he would be outside. The letters often arrived shortly after she had been seen nearby. It became clear that she was watching closely, planning each action to maximize pressure. This realization was unsettling, but it also confirmed that her behavior was intentional, not accidental. He began preparing a summary of all the incidents. He listed every interaction, every note, every appearance she had made. He cross-referenced the timeline with photographs and videos, creating a clear record of his compliance and her false accusations. The process was meticulous, but he knew it would be crucial if he needed to prove the truth. One morning, he received a message that seemed designed to provoke fear. It suggested that he could face fines, legal action, and other consequences if the violations were not addressed immediately. He calmly read it, then carefully photographed and stored it. He refused to respond emotionally. He knew that maintaining a composed and factual approach was the most effective way to handle her tactics. The homeowner also started noticing inconsistencies in her behavior. Sometimes she would claim she had spoken to the HOA office or other authorities, but he verified that no such communication had occurred. Other times, she would provide dates and times that did not match the actual schedule. These small lies made it clear that she was willing to manipulate facts to create pressure. Despite her aggressive approach, he continued to interact politely with neighbors and maintain his routines. He greeted people when appropriate, tended to his yard, and kept his home in excellent condition. By staying consistent and calm, he hoped to contrast his own behavior with hers, making it easier for others to see the truth. He also started discussing the situation with a few trusted neighbors, sharing his observations and seeking advice without creating gossip. These conversations confirmed that she had a history of targeting others selectively, but most people avoided confrontation. His careful approach allowed him to gather information without escalating the conflict. As the days passed, it became clear that her scheme was escalating in seriousness. The accusations were becoming more formal, more threatening, and increasingly detached from reality. She was using intimidation, false claims, and exaggerations to create stress and fear. The homeowner realized that he needed to stay one step ahead, focusing on evidence, documentation, and calm persistence. Late at night, he reviewed all his collected evidence. The folders of photographs, notes, and videos painted a clear picture of his compliance and her deliberate falsehoods. Small details like inconsistent logos and misleading language revealed her willingness to bend rules. He realized that patience, preparation, careful observation were his most powerful tools. The tension on the street remained high. What had started as minor annoyances had evolved into a calculated campaign against him. He knew that exposing her actions would require careful strategy and solid evidence. Every interaction, every visit, every note left by her became part of a growing case that he would one day present. Despite the stress, he felt a growing sense of determination. He would not let intimidation control him. By staying calm, documenting everything, and preparing thoroughly, he knew he could eventually reveal the truth. The HOA woman's tactics were clear, but so was his plan. Patience, accuracy, and evidence would be stronger than lies, fear, or exaggeration. He looked out at the quiet street, feeling both the weight of the ongoing situation and a growing confidence in his approach. The conflict was far from over, but he was ready. Each day of careful observation, documentation, and calm persistence was bringing him closer to the moment when her actions would be exposed. And he knew that, when the truth came out, it would speak louder than any warning, any fabricated complaint, or any attempt to intimidate him by the time the fourth week of this ongoing ordeal arrived. The tension in the neighborhood had become almost tangible. The homeowner had continued his careful routine of mowing the lawn, cleaning the driveway, and tending to the garden, documenting every step with photographs and videos. He had also kept every note, warning, and message left by the HOA woman in a dedicated folder. The evidence was growing. He was beginning to see the full picture of her relentless targeting. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. When he opened it, a uniformed police officer stood on his porch. The homeowner invited the officer inside and offered a seat at the kitchen table. The officer explained that a complaint had been filed against him regarding alleged violations of HOA rules and neighborhood disturbances. The homeowner calmly listened and then presented his collected evidence, photographs, videos, folders, and notes, documenting every interaction and activity. He carefully explained each incident, showing that all work on his property had been done properly and within the rules. The officer listened attentively, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. He then requested to speak to the HOA woman. The homeowner provided the details he had, and the officer left to verify the information. The homeowner felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief, because someone outside of the HOA was now involved. Anxiety, because he didn't know how the woman would respond when confronted. A few hours later, the officer returned. He asked the homeowner to stay calm and be patient while he explained what he had found. It turned out that the HOA woman had filed several misleading reports, exaggerating small issues and fabricating others entirely. Some of the notices even contained inconsistent information and incorrect logos. The officer explained that her actions could be considered an abuse of authority. She would be warned about filing false reports in the future. The homeowner felt a wave of satisfaction. His careful documentation had paid off, exposing the true nature of the woman's behavior. However, the officer advised him to continue recording any future interactions until the matter was officially resolved. The homeowner agreed, feeling confident but aware that the situation was not entirely over. The following days were quieter, though she still patrolled the neighborhood occasionally. Each time, the homeowner remained calm, continuing to document and maintain his routines. He noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She seemed less confident, more cautious, and less inclined to leave notes or warnings. It was clear that the presence of the officer and the evidence it presented had shaken her. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. Some approached the homeowner quietly to express relief and admiration for how he had handled the situation. They mentioned that they had previously felt intimidated by the HOA woman's behavior, but had been hesitant to speak up. The homeowner listened, offering reassurance and emphasizing the importance of staying calm and factual in the face of intimidation. The HOA woman, sensing her influence waning, attempted a few last-ditch efforts. She left notes with more vague warnings and tried to suggest that the homeowner had violated rules in ways he had already documented. Each attempt was met with calm responses and clear evidence, further undermining her credibility. The officer remained in the background, available for any necessary intervention, which made her actions even less effective. One morning, the officer returned to the homeowner's house for a follow-up. He explained that the HOA office had been contacted and that the woman had been officially warned about her behavior. Her ability to issue arbitrary fines or warnings had been restricted, and her reports would now be closely reviewed before any action could be taken. The officer commended the homeowner for his meticulous records, noting that his patience and careful documentation had made the difference. The homeowner felt a sense of quiet vindication. The pressure and stress of the past weeks had been intense, but his methodical approach had not only protected him, but also exposed someone who had been abusing her position. He reflected on the lessons learned, staying calm, maintaining records, and approaching conflict strategically could overcome even persistent intimidation. With the immediate threat reduced, he resumed his routines with a renewed sense of confidence. Mowing the lawn, washing the car, and tending to the garden no longer carried the same tension. Even when the HOA woman walked past, he noticed her hesitating, unsure of how to act now that her power had been checked. The neighborhood began to feel more normal again, though he remained vigilant. Knowing that patience and observation were still important, neighbors slowly started to interact more openly. Some greeted him warmly, acknowledging the ordeal he had endured, while others shared stories of similar experiences they had faced in silence. The homeowner listened, offering reassurance and emphasizing that careful preparation and calm responses could make a difference. His actions had quietly set an example for others in the neighborhood. As days turned into weeks, the HOA woman's influence diminished further. She no longer left notes or warnings and seemed to focus her attention elsewhere. The homeowner continued documenting minor interactions, but they were far less frequent and less threatening. He had effectively neutralized her ability to intimidate him. The experience left him with a deeper understanding of human behavior and the dynamics of power within small communities. He realized that people in positions of authority could sometimes overstep boundaries, but careful observation, documentation, and strategic responses could restore balance. He also recognized the value of patience, as acting rashly could have escalated the situation. One evening, as he sat on his porch enjoying the calm of the street, he reflected on the journey from the first encounter to this point. The stress and tension had been intense, but the resolution was satisfying. He had not resorted to anger or confrontation, but had relied on truth, evidence, and patience. The neighborhood had returned to a quieter, more peaceful rhythm, and he felt a sense of accomplishment. He continued to maintain his home and interact politely with neighbors, serving as a subtle reminder that fairness and integrity could overcome intimidation. The HOA woman remained in the neighborhood, but her influence had been curtailed. Her attempts to assert control had been exposed. The homeowner felt confident that any future attempts would be met with the same careful, documented approach. The situation had also strengthened his relationships with those who had been observing quietly. Some neighbors now shared their own stories and offered small gestures of support, creating a sense of community that had been missing during the height of the conflict. The homeowner appreciated these connections, recognizing that quiet solidarity could be powerful in difficult situations. The months following the officer's intervention were marked by a return to normalcy. The homeowner continued his routines, maintained his property meticulously, and stayed vigilant, but the stress and fear had lifted. The HOA woman's attempts to manipulate and intimidate him were no longer effective. The calm street, once disrupted by her actions, had returned to its quiet rhythm. Reflecting on the experience, he realized that preparation, patience, and careful documentation were the keys to overcoming challenges of this nature. By staying calm and factual, he had turned the situation around, protecting himself and restoring balance to the neighborhood. The lessons learned would remain valuable in future encounters with authority or intimidation. The homeowner continued to enjoy his home, tending to his yard and interacting with neighbors in a friendly and measured way. He knew that while challenges could arise, the combination of calm, resolve, careful observation, and thorough documentation would allow him to navigate conflicts effectively. The quiet sense of victory was satisfying, and the peace he had sought when moving into the neighborhood was finally restored. Through this ordeal, he also recognized the importance of community support. Even small gestures from neighbors, observing quietly or offering reassurance, contributed to the eventual resolution. It reinforced the idea that standing up to intimidation did not require confrontation alone, but could also involve careful planning, patience, and truth. As he looked around his property, noting the well-trimmed lawn and clean driveway, he felt a deep sense of pride. The street was calm, the neighbors were respectful, and the HOA woman's attempts to dominate had been exposed. He had successfully navigated a challenging situation without compromising his values or integrity. The experience left him stronger, wiser, and more confident in his ability to handle conflicts calmly and effectively the following weeks. After the officer's intervention brought a quiet relief that had been missing from the neighborhood for months, the homeowner felt a sense of calm returning to his daily life. He continued to maintain his property meticulously, keeping his lawn trimmed, the driveway clean, and the garden tidy. Each task, once fraught with anxiety because of the HOA woman's scrutiny, was now a small victory in itself. The simple act of following the rules on his own terms felt empowering. The HOA woman seemed to sense that her influence had been diminished. She appeared less often and left no notes or warnings. The once confident and aggressive patrols around his house had vanished, Even when she walked past, she avoided direct interaction, her usual smirk replaced by cautious glances. The homeowner noticed this and felt a quiet satisfaction. Her power had been checked, and it was all due to his patience and preparation. Neighbors, who had observed the entire ordeal, began to approach him with quiet nods or smiles. Some shared that they had been intimidated by her behavior in the past, but had chosen to stay silent. Seeing him remain calm and collect evidence had given them hope and courage. A few neighbors spoke about small acts of support they had provided behind the scenes, like offering information or confirming times when she had been aggressive. It became clear that the community, though initially silent, had been watching and learning from his approach. The homeowner realized that the ordeal had not only protected him, but also subtly shifted the neighborhood dynamics. Others had observed that manipulation and intimidation could be confronted with patience, truth, and evidence. The HOA woman's approach no longer inspired fear. Instead, it had become a cautionary tale. During this time, the officer followed up occasionally to ensure there were no further complaints or incidents. Each interaction with the officer was brief and professional, but it reinforced the homeowner's sense of security. Knowing that an authority figure was aware of the situation and that he had already presented clear evidence provided a lasting reassurance. The HOA woman was now fully aware that false complaints could no longer be used to intimidate him. The homeowner reflected on the changes in his own approach. Initially, he had been anxious, unsure of how to handle the persistent harassment. But over time, his strategy of remaining calm, documenting everything, and relying on official channels had proven effective. Each piece of evidence built a strong case, demonstrating that careful preparation could overcome even calculated intimidation. One afternoon, noticed her leaving the neighborhood entirely. She had probably realized that her efforts would no longer yield results. The absence was noticeable, and it marked a turning point. The street returned to a peaceful rhythm, dogs barked casually, and neighbors began interacting with each other more openly. The calm that had drawn him to this neighborhood months ago was finally restored. With the threat gone, the homeowner found new appreciation for his surroundings. Every morning, he would step outside to tend to his yard, enjoying the small details that had once been overshadowed by stress. The smell of freshly cut grass, the sound of birds in the trees, and the sight of a clean, orderly home became symbols of his regained control and peace. He also noticed changes in his interactions with neighbors. Conversations were more relaxed, and smiles and nods were more frequent. Some neighbors approached him privately, expressing admiration for the way he had handled the situation. They mentioned that his calm, evidence-based approach had inspired them to stand up to minor neighborhood conflicts in their own ways. It became clear that his actions had created a ripple effect, encouraging others to respond thoughtfully rather than with fear or aggression. The HOA woman's absence and the neighborhood's return to normalcy brought a new sense of freedom. The homeowner could now focus on the things that had drawn him to the neighborhood in the first place: quiet mornings, friendly waves from neighbors, and the simple satisfaction of a well-kept home. He realized that while her intimidation had caused stress, it had also strengthened his patience, attention to detail, and confidence in handling conflicts. Reflecting on the experience, he recognized several key lessons. First, preparation and documentation were invaluable when facing someone willing to bend rules for personal gain. Second, patience and calm responses could neutralize intimidation more effectively than confrontation or anger. Third, community observation and quiet support, even if indirect, could provide reinforcement and eventual solidarity. Each of these lessons had practical value, not just in this situation, but in any interaction where power and control were at play. As the weeks passed, the neighborhood settled into a comfortable routine. The homeowner continued his normal activities without fear of false reports or arbitrary complaints. The street was calm, and neighbors began interacting more freely, a sign that the fear that had once hung over the area was dissipating. It became a place where simple acts of courtesy and community awareness regained prominence over intimidation and manipulation. One day, a new neighbor moved in. The homeowner greeted them warmly, sharing tips about the neighborhood and subtly passing on wisdom about the importance of staying informed and calm when dealing with authority. He refrained from speaking negatively about past conflicts, instead focusing on practical advice. The new neighbor appreciated the insight and felt more confident in navigating the neighborhood rules. In the evenings, the homeowner often sat on his porch, reflecting on the ordeal and the lessons it had taught him. The stress and anxiety that had once weighed heavily now felt like a distant memory. What had started as an overwhelming challenge had transformed into an opportunity for growth and understanding. He had proven to himself that integrity, patience, and careful preparation could overcome even the most persistent intimidation. The HOA woman, now sidelined, served as a reminder of how people could misuse authority, but she no longer posed a threat. Her attempts to dominate had been exposed, and the neighborhood had quietly learned from the experience. The homeowner felt a sense of quiet pride, knowing that he had handled the situation without losing his composure or compromising his values. Months after the resolution, the street remained calm. The homeowner continued his routines, interacted respectfully with neighbors, and maintained his property with care. The community, once overshadowed by fear and intimidation, had returned to a state of quiet respect and friendly vigilance. He understood that conflicts could arise again, but he now had confidence in his ability to respond calmly, document thoroughly, and rely on truth to guide his actions.